Every one of us wakes up each day faced with decisions, big and small, that shape our lives. But before we respond to the world, to emails, to other people's needs or expectations, there is a more fundamental question we must answer. Why do I matter to myself? Most people skip that question entirely. They rush to be useful, to be needed, to be productive. But usefulness without personal grounding becomes exhausting. When we don't know why we're moving, we often end up running in circles. The idea of putting yourself first is often misunderstood. It's not about ego, or selfishness, or isolation. It's about responsibility. You are responsible for your energy, your thoughts, your growth, and your choices. No one else is going to care about your potential the way you should. And if you hand that responsibility to others, waiting for someone to save, validate, or fix you, you're not only setting yourself up for disappointment, you're abandoning your most sacred duty. We're taught from a young age to put others first. Be kind, be helpful, be generous. Those are beautiful values. But what they don't teach us is that generosity without boundaries leads to burnout. Kindness without self-regard can become people-pleasing. Being helpful can become an escape from our own unresolved work. So the real question is not whether you should help others, but whether you first learn to help yourself. Taking responsibility for yourself means looking inward, not outward. It's asking, what do I believe? What do I need to be at my best? What makes me come alive? Most people don't have answers to those questions because they've spent too long answering someone else's. We chase titles, validation, applause, but external achievement will never compensate for internal confusion. Your greatest power lies in knowing what drives you from the inside out. There's a certain courage required to take full ownership of your life. It's easier to blame circumstances, parents, bosses, partners. It's easier to say, I'm stuck because of them. But responsibility isn't about blame, it's about agency. It's the moment you say, no one else is coming. I'm the one I've been waiting for. That is where growth begins, not when we control the world, but when we take control of how we show up in it. When you focus on yourself with intention, something shifts. You become more grounded. You listen better. You choose more wisely. You choose more wisely. You stop chasing approval because you already know your worth. That inner clarity is not loud. It doesn't need to be. It's the quiet confidence that you are moving from a place of alignment, not anxiety. Responsibility for yourself also means owning your weaknesses. Not to shame yourself, but to become more self-aware. What triggers you? What patterns keep repeating? What wounds still need attention? It's far easier to project or deflect than to examine. But personal responsibility invites growth through truth. Truth? You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be honest. And with honesty comes freedom. Because when you know who you are, why you are, and what matters to you, decisions become simpler. Not easier, but clearer. You stop living reactively and start living deliberately. That's the power of focusing on yourself, not to isolate, but to build a stronger, truer foundation from which everything else can rise. At some point, we all fall into the trap of looking sideways. We scroll, we watch, we measure. We see someone else winning, smiling, succeeding, and something inside us whispers, you're behind. This is the silent cost of comparison. Not jealousy, but fatigue. A slow, steady drain of energy that comes from believing your path should look like someone else's. A comparison is subtle. Comparison is subtle. It disguises itself as motivation. We tell ourselves, if they can do it, I should be able to. But that phrase, even with the best intentions, often carries quiet shame. It doesn't push us forward. It makes us question why we're not already there. It's not their success that's hurting us. It's the story we tell ourselves about what their success says about us. No two people have the same starting line. You don't know the weight someone else carries, the shortcuts they took, or the seasons they've walked through. Yet we measure our progress against the polished highlight reels of people we barely know. It's not a fair fight. And even when you win, it doesn't feel like winning. It just resets the benchmark higher. It's a race that never ends. There's a cost to chasing shadows. When your energy is spent watching others, you lose focus on your own craft. You make decisions based on optics, not alignment. You choose paths, not because they're right, but because they look impressive. Slowly, without realizing it, you build a life that looks successful from the outside but feels hollow on the inside. Comparison also kills creativity. When you're constantly measuring, you hesitate to explore. You fear looking foolish. You stop taking risks because you're too busy calculating how you'll be perceived. But innovation doesn't come from imitation. It comes from authenticity. And you can't be authentic if you're obsessed with someone else's script. There's a difference between inspiration and imitation. Inspiration lifts you. It reminds you what's possible. Imitation, driven by comparison, makes you question if you're enough. If one expands your vision, the other shrinks it. The danger isn't in admiring others. The danger is in believing their success diminishes yours. We must remember that energy is a limited resource. Every minute spent comparing is a minute not spent building, learning, or reflecting. When your mental real estate is occupied by someone else's progress, there's no room for your own. You can't grow roots if you're always scanning someone else's garden. The truth is, peace and purpose don't come from outrunning others. They come from outgrowing your past self. That's the only race that matters. You don't need to be ahead. You need to be aligned. Be aligned. And alignment only happens when your focus is on your lane, your values, and your pace. We live in a world that rewards speed, reaction, and noise. There's always another message to answer, another opinion to consider, another trend to chase. In the middle of all that, it's easy to lose yourself. Not because you're not trying, but because you're trying to respond to everything at once. Chaos isn't always loud. It often shows up as constant distraction disguised as urgency. Clarity doesn't happen by accident. It requires space, silence, and self-honesty. It begins the moment you stop asking, "What do they want from me?" and start asking, "What do I actually want for myself?" That shift, from reaction to reflection, is the foundation of direction. Until you know what you value, you'll keep getting pulled by what's loudest, not what's truest. Focusing on yourself isn't an escape from the world. It's preparation for engaging with it. When you're grounded in your own values, decisions become clearer. You stop chasing every opportunity and start choosing the ones that align. The clutter begins to fall away, not because the world got quieter, but because your vision got sharper. Without clarity, even hard work becomes scattered. You can hustle endlessly and still feel stuck if you don't know where you're going. Motion isn't the same as movement. Productivity isn't the same as purpose. When your effort lacks intention, exhaustion is inevitable. Self-focus turns work into progress by giving it direction. Distraction often feels like progress in disguise. You convince yourself that you're staying informed, staying busy, staying connected. Staying connected. But staying busy isn't the same as being intentional. There's a difference between momentum and noise. Self-focus teaches you to tell the difference. It draws a line between what's urgent and what's important. People often wait for clarity to appear before they act. But real clarity comes from commitment. It's revealed through trial, error, reflection. You can't think your way into direction. You have to move with intention and adjust along the way. Self-focus doesn't mean having all the answers. It means being willing to keep asking better questions. When you're clear, it shows. In your posture, in your pace, in your decisions. You no longer need to prove yourself with every move, because you're no longer performing for approval. You're acting from alignment. That kind of clarity creates momentum. Not the frantic kind, but the kind that compounds over time with quiet confidence. It's not that the chaos disappears, it's that it loses its grip. When your inner compass is working, the noise outside can keep spinning and you'll still know which way is forward. Focused attention isn't about narrowing your world. It's about anchoring your direction so you can navigate it on your terms. Discipline is often misunderstood as restriction, as if it's something that confines you or takes joy away. But real discipline isn't about punishment. It's about protection. It's the structure you build to honor what matters to you. When you follow through on your commitments, even when it's hard, you're telling yourself, I am worth showing up for. Most people think motivation is the key to action. But motivation comes and goes. It's unreliable. Discipline, on the other hand, is stable. It steps in when motivation disappears. It's not fueled by mood, but by meaning. And when you build a life around discipline, you're not waiting for the right feeling. You're guided by the right values. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you cast a vote for the future version of yourself. Not the idealized, perfect self, but the consistent one. The self who follows through, who doesn't ghost on their own potential, who does what needs to be done, when it needs to be done. That consistency becomes identity, and identity becomes destiny. Self-respect isn't just how you speak to yourself. It's how you treat your own time. When you constantly break promises to yourself, even small ones, you slowly erode your trust in you. Discipline is the opposite. It rebuilds that trust one decision at a time. It's not about being perfect. It's about proving to yourself that you are dependable. There's a quiet kind of pride that comes from discipline. Not the kind you broadcast to the world, but the kind that builds quietly behind the scenes. The pride of knowing you did what you said you would, even when no one was watching. That's the foundation of confidence. Not praise from others, but proof from within. Discipline isn't rigid. It's adaptive. It learns and evolves with you. It doesn't demand you grind endlessly. It teaches you to prioritize wisely. It's knowing when to push and when to pause. It's the clarity to say yes to what matters and the strength to say no to what doesn't. That kind of clarity isn't a sacrifice. It's a strategy. There will always be easier options. Always a more comfortable choice. Discipline doesn't remove those. It just helps you choose better. It reminds you that comfort now often comes at the cost of growth later. And growth later always starts with discomfort now. That's not a punishment. It's an investment. When you honor your own boundaries, your own goals, your own routines, you are signaling to yourself and the world that you are serious about your life, that you don't need to wait for pressure or permission to act, that your word to yourself carries weight. That is what self-respect looks like in action. Most people are taught to keep moving. Push through the pain, stay productive, be strong. But strength isn't found in how much you can carry without breaking. It's in knowing when to set things down and deal with what's already weighing you down. Healing doesn't slow you down, avoiding it does. Because what you don't face quietly becomes what controls you. There's a belief that taking time for yourself, to rest, to reflect, to process, is self-indulgent. That if you're not constantly producing or helping others, you're falling behind. But healing isn't about pulling away from life. It's about returning to it more whole. It's an act of long-term clarity, not short-term comfort. You don't heal to escape reality. You heal to re-enter it better equipped. Unhealed wounds don't disappear with time. They disguise themselves in overreaction, in burnout, in broken relationships, in the way we abandon ourselves while trying to please others. The damage often shows up far from where it started. Healing brings those pieces back into view, not to dwell, but to understand. Because understanding is what allows release. Taking time to heal is a strategy rooted in self-leadership. It's the decision to stop transferring pain onto others and start transforming it within yourself. It's not weakness. It's emotional intelligence. It's realizing that unresolved pain limits your perspective, clouds your decisions, and leaks into your work, your parenting, your leadership, your love. People often wait until everything falls apart to start healing, but you don't need a breakdown to justify a breakthrough. You can choose to pause before life forces it on you. Healing proactively isn't selfish, it's preventative. It's how you build emotional durability, not just for yourself, but for the people you show up for every day. There's a discipline to healing. It's not just about feeling, it's about facing. It's about facing. It means choosing to sit with discomfort instead of numbing it. To be honest about what hurt you, what shaped you, what you've been carrying for years without realizing it. That kind of honesty isn't easy. But it's the path to personal alignment and inner strength. Healing also creates space for clarity. When you're no longer tangled in old pain, you make better decisions. You respond instead of reacting. You stop trying to prove something and start choosing from a place of peace. The noise gets quieter. The patterns become visible. And the future opens up in a way it couldn't when your energy was trapped in the past. The people who heal don't become less engaged. They become more impactful because they're no longer operating from survival. They're grounded, intentional, present. They have energy that isn't tied up in pretending, performing, or protecting old wounds. That energy becomes available for growth, connection, and contribution. The people you keep around. You are more than just companions. They're mirrors. They reflect the values you prioritize, the boundaries you enforce, and the standards you uphold. If you want to understand your own growth, look at your circle. Who challenges you? Who drains you? Who breeds you? Who inspires you? Your environment doesn't just influence you, it quietly shapes you. We attract what we tolerate. If you're surrounded by people who gossip, complain, or avoid responsibility, it's not just about them. It's about what part of you is still comfortable with that energy. The company you keep isn't always a coincidence. Sometimes it's a reflection of your comfort zone. Sometimes it's a reflection of your comfort zone. And growth often begins with recognizing when your environment no longer matches your direction. It's easy to hold on to familiar people out of loyalty, history, or fear of being alone. But not everyone you start with is meant to go the whole way. As you begin focusing on yourself, getting clear on your values and goals, something inevitable happens. Your circle starts to shift. Some people won't understand the new version of you. Some will resist it. That's not a sign to stop. It's a sign that alignment is taking place. You don't need to cut people off with anger to evolve. You can create distance with love and move forward with clarity. Protecting your energy isn't about being superior. It's about being intentional. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world, especially if they constantly bring chaos into it. Clarity about your center leads to discernment in your circle. The right people won't compete with your growth. They'll encourage it. They won't be threatened by your boundaries. They'll respect them. They won't drain your energy. They'll help you protect it. When your inner world becomes healthier, you naturally seek relationships that reflect that health. You stop bonding over wounds and start connecting through vision. One of the most overlooked parts of self-focus is evaluating who you're giving time, energy, and trust to. Not everyone has to be perfect, but your core circle should align with your direction. If you're committed to healing, growth, discipline, and clarity, but you're surrounded by people who aren't, it creates a quiet friction. That friction wears on your momentum. Sometimes we outgrow people not because they're bad, but because we've finally gotten honest about what we need. Your standards evolve with your self-respect. The more seriously you take your own journey, the less tolerance you have for relationships that pull you off course. And the stronger your center becomes, the less external validation you require. True alignment isn't about surrounding yourself with people who agree with you. It's about being around people who challenge you to stay honest with yourself, who remind you of your why when you start to forget, who support your growth, not your comfort. Your circle is never neutral. I know it's all. It's either reinforcing your highest self or enabling your lowest one. Progress doesn't just require effort. It requires protection. Time, energy, focus, these are your most limited resources, and without boundaries, they're up for grabs. They're up for grabs. People will always ask for more than you can give, not out of malice, but because they don't know what it costs you. If you don't define your limits, someone else will define them for you. There's a false belief that saying yes makes you kind, and saying a no makes you difficult. But every yes without intention is a quiet no to yourself. You can't grow if you're constantly managing other people's expectations at the expense of your own needs. Boundaries aren't barriers to connection. They're the foundation of sustainable contribution. Every time you apologize for needing space, rest, or focus, you reinforce the idea that your well-being is negotiable. When you honor your boundaries, you're not rejecting others, you're respecting yourself. People often mistake availability for generosity, but being constantly available drains the very energy you need to do meaningful work. Boundaries are how you preserve your capacity to serve, lead, and grow without burning out. Saying no doesn't make you selfish, it makes you strategic. It means you're choosing direction over distraction. The truth is, not everyone will understand your boundaries. Some will take it personally. Some will push back. But their reaction doesn't mean your boundary is wrong. It means it's working. Discomfort is often the price of alignment. Growth doesn't require you to be rude. It requires you to be clear. Clarity isn't cruelty. Clarity isn't cruelty. It's respect for both sides. As you begin to change, you'll notice the pull to explain yourself, to soften your boundaries with justifications. But boundaries don't need backstories. You don't owe everyone a PowerPoint on why your priorities have shifted. You can be kind without over-explaining. You can be firm without being harsh. Silence is sometimes the most powerful form of self-respect. Progress demands structure. And structure is built through decisions about what gets your attention and what doesn't. You can't do deep work in a life full of constant access. You can't evolve while trying to maintain every relationship, answer every message, attend every event. Boundaries are the architecture of progress. They hold your vision in place. When you stop apologizing for your limits, you give yourself permission to expand in the right direction. Not faster, but fuller. Not for others' approval, but from your own alignment. Growth isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters most. And protecting it like it matters perfection is a moving target, shaped by culture, comparison, and fear. It promises approval but delivers exhaustion. The chase never ends, because the rules always change. You can do everything right and still feel like you're not enough. That's the trap. When you pursue perfection, you outsource your worth to a standard that was never yours to begin with. Alignment is different. It's internal. It's internal. It asks not a how do I look, but a does this feel true? It's not about having a flawless record. It's about having a clear compass. Perfection pressures you to perform. Alignment invites you to be honest. One pulls you outward, the other pulls you inward, and only one leads to peace. When you live in alignment, your choices match your values. Your actions reflect your beliefs. Your habits support your vision. And even when you fall short, there's no collapse, because your worth isn't tied to performance. It's tied to performance. It's tied to purpose. You're allowed to be in process. You're allowed to be a work in progress and still walk in integrity. People often wait until they feel ready or good enough to start. But alignment doesn't wait for perfection. It begins with clarity and builds through consistency. It's making choices that are messy, but meaningful. It's showing up imperfectly, but fully. And that's where momentum comes from, not from being flawless, but from being real. There's freedom in choosing alignment. You no longer have to wear masks, chase approval, or pretend to be further along than you are. You no longer have to fear every mistake as proof of failure. Alignment gives you permission to be fully human, flawed, evolving, and still deeply worthy. That's not weakness. That's authenticity. Alignment is sustainable. Perfection burns fast and bright, but it doesn't last. It leads to burnout, imposter syndrome, and fear of being found out. But alignment? It allows for growth. It invites reflection. It creates space for learning and grace. You don't have to fake it. You just have to stay connected to what's real. In a world obsessed with optics, alignment is an act of quiet rebellion. It's choosing depth over decoration, substance over style, fulfillment over applause. It may not always be the loudest path, but it's the one that feels like home. It's the one that feels like home. The one where your outer world finally begins to reflect your inner truth. You don't need to impress everyone. You need to align with yourself. That alignment becomes your filter, your boundary, your guide. It simplifies decisions, strengthens your confidence, and creates a rhythm that's uniquely yours. And when you walk in alignment, you stop needing to prove yourself because you're already walking in your truth.